And with that, let's now shift focus over to the United States. US President Joe Biden has ordered a ban on certain US tech investments that going to China. On Wednesday, Biden signed an executive order that will prohibit some new US investments in China in sensitive technologies. So what is this executive order all about? To begin with, it pertains to technologies like computer chips and requires government notification in other tech sectors. And with the authorization of this long-awaited order, the US Treasury Secretary will finally be able to prohibit or restrict US investments in Chinese entities in 3 sectors. What are they? They are semiconductors and microelectronics, quantum information technologies, and certain artificial intelligence. The administration has not given any specifics, but the proposal is open for public input. The order prevents American capital and expertise from helping China, this to develop technologies that could support its military modernization and undermine US national security. Let me also tell you about this letter that was addressed to the Congress by the Democrat US President. It called the issue a national emergency. Such was the importance of this order, simply because of the threat of advancement by countries like China in sensitive technologies and products critical to the military, intelligence surveillance, or cyber-enabled capabilities. China said it is gravely concerned about this executive order and that it reserves the right to take measures. And before I quickly dive in with my guest, here's a report.
I'm paying attention.
US President Joe Biden signed an executive order banning certain US investments in sensitive technology in China on Wednesday, a move that risks fueling tensions between the world's 2 largest economies after the White House has tried to stabilize ties with Beijing. The investment ban focuses on semiconductors, quantum tech, and artificial intelligence, areas where the US, Japan, and the Netherlands have dominated and where China has worked to develop homegrown alternatives. The order aims to stem the flow of US capital to tech like that, which could also boost China's military modernization. Biden sent a letter to Congress declaring a national emergency over the issue, and hours earlier spoke to an audience in New Mexico emphasizing domestic investment.
We're continuing to make progress in fixing the supply chain. For example, we couldn't access semiconductors during the pandemic because the factories making them overseas were shut down. You all know semiconductors are those little small computer chips about the size of any fingertip that affect nearly everything in our lives.
It may take many months before Biden's order comes into effect, possibly not enacted until well into 2024, a presidential election year. The White House said Biden consulted allies on the plan and incorporated feedback from a group of 7 nations. The administration also said the controls will apply to narrow subsets of the 3 areas, and they will not be retroactive. The Treasury issued an advance notice on the rules, saying some deals would be banned once the regulations kick in, and investors must notify the government of their plans on others. The restrictions will also apply to Hong Kong and Macau, both separate customs territories from China. China on Thursday said it is gravely concerned about the order. A Commerce Ministry statement criticized Washington of, quote, artificially hindering global economic and trade exchanges and cooperation or set up obstacles for the recovery of the world economy. The Chinese Foreign Ministry said it lodged solemn representations with the US. It said the country was strongly dissatisfied with and resolutely opposes the US's insistence on introducing investment restrictions on China.
The United States wants to maintain its technology primacy vis-a-vis other competitors and trying to come up with this kind of a schemes to stop other countries from catching up. But history has shown that these measures have all failed. It's not going to stop China from developing these technologies. I mean, China has its own history of being sanctioned by other countries in technology, but the outcome is exact contrary. You know, China develops its own indigenous technologies. in the short run, you're going to see some effect on Chinese companies. Of course, the source is being cut off. It's going to have an impact. But I think over time, Chinese companies are going to catch up. I mean, there's some examples like this. I mean, think about this. Washington has been trying to kill Huawei. But look at today's Huawei. Huawei has just announced that it's about to restart its handset business. There's a lot of resilience on the corporate China side, and there's also a lot of technological prowess as well. So I'm kind of confident that there are going to be some short-term effect, but over time, these measures, these policies, will prove to be futile.
All right, and with that, let me also bring in my guest today. I'm joined in by Amy K. Mitchell, who's a fellow from the National Security Institute. Thank you so much, Amy, for joining in. Before we delve into the repercussions of this, we've seen semiconductors become a flashpoint in the US-China relationship. Is the US order finally giving shape to that chip war because the proposal targets investments in Chinese companies that develop and design these chips and tools?
Well, I think we've seen movement in the past year that we are trying to diversify our supply chain on chips. We're doing more partnerships with Taiwan, Korea. We're looking for other places as well as building more here. And this executive order follows on numerous legislation that has been passed by this administration to build back up the American supply chain so that we don't have this dependency any longer on another nation to get vital national security tools and products.
Right, and several Republicans, in fact, from the US Congress have called out the fact that not including existing technology investments as well as sectors like biotechnology and energy in this executive order is a failure that remains a massive concern. How do you assess that allegation coming in from the Republicans?
I think it's accurate. I think that there has been an emphasis in this Congress, both Republican and Democrat actually, to look more closely at the relationship with China, look at our national security concerns, and take action. Originally, this executive order was to have 5 key technologies. They whittled it down to 3, unfortunately. It also doesn't address the issue of passive investments that are helping to also fund many of these military PLA companies and China writ large.
Right. Amy, China's Commerce Ministry has in fact accused the US of disrupting global industry and supply chains. You were talking about diversifying the American chain itself, but this is the accusation that's now coming in from China's Commerce Ministry, that it is the United States which is in fact practicing double standards. It's saying that they are the ones deviating from the market economy and fair competition principles. Are these double standards being practiced by the United States?
No, they're not. The response from the Chinese foreign ministry, it was expected. They like to say one thing and do the exact opposite in all of their dealings around the world. They've put numerous nations at risk of default with the Belt and Road Initiative and the Digital Silk Road, because they come in, they say everything's going to be fine, and then they'll on the front end, but it's impossible to fulfill for these nations on the back end, which creates this dependency on China. So by the U.S. market and this administration saying, we're not going to play by your rules anymore, we're going to create our own set of rules and do what's best for Americans, for our national security, we're essentially calling out China on their practices. Nothing in this EO should come as a surprise to the CCP. It's been talked about for almost a year. And, there was, and again, this is not a ban on past investments, it's a ban on future. So I think looking forward, China, as always, is just a lot of talk, and they like to open up their wolf warrior.
All right, Amy, after a host of diplomatic and entrepreneurial visits by the likes of, say, an Antony Blinken, Janet Yellen, even tech tycoons like Elon Musk and Bill Gates, will the executive order further deteriorate the US-China relationship despite all that was achieved in the last couple of months?
You know, I don't think so. I think that this is a long-term strategy, that there are people looking ahead and making these very thoughtful moves. It was long overdue. And you have to remember that doing business in China today is very different than it was even doing business 5 years ago. Parties asking U.S. firms and other international firms for their accounting, detaining people. And there was a statement from Hong Kong as well about how this was unfair to Hong Kong, which is interesting because we continue to treat Hong Kong as a separate entity, not recognizing that Hong Kong is now fully part of China, and that their control is from Beijing. And I think it's important for us to note that the China that we thought would open doors in the 1990s on the economic front is closing those same doors. They want investment. They want our leadership. They want the Elon Musks of the world to do business there, but they only want to do it on their terms. And a lot of the world is saying yours aren't fair. Your terms are not good enough for us anymore.
All right, Amy, we'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for joining in with your inputs.